Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Allies Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. We're going to try and answer some more of your questions in this episode, including a couple more queries around the Oasis live shows next summer and the payment rates for using samples in your recordings. But just before we get to that, we didn't have time last week to report back on this due to our National Album Day special, but we did promise a couple of weeks ago that we'd give you some news from the Music Venue Trust's annual Venues Day event. The Music Venue Trust being the organisation that represents over 800 grassroots venues around the UK. They held their annual Venues Day, their 10th one a couple of weeks ago now, and it was a really useful event. I mean, there was a lot of interesting discussion around the economics of venues and what grassroots venues might look like in the future. And I think the tone, particularly as it was the 10th Venues Day, was quite buoyant, but there was still some stats that probably need to be addressed, of which one of the most telling, Stuart, was this: when it comes to, it's all about the live circuit and how it's changed over the years. And they were looking at the numbers of gigs which are being put on. But one of the things which really stuck out was the length of tours that are going out around the UK. So in 1994, the average length of a tour was 22 dates. The average length of a tour as it stands now, 11 shows. Tours are half the length of what they used to be, which is basically down to the costs involved in artists going out on the road. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence for this, that it's becoming harder and harder for artists to make their budgets work on the road. I had a conversation actually with David Martin from the Featured Artists Coalition about this, talking about how hard it is for artists to put on the shows that they'd like to put on because of rising costs. And you can see this, it's happening all over the place. Even in the last couple of weeks, various tours have either been cancelled or cut short. I don't know if you saw, there was a post recently from Leela Moss, singer with the Duke Spirit, who had a solo tour planned for later this year, which she's now had to pull because it was going to end up costing her a lot of her own money to do the dates. And she said that the spiralling costs of putting these dates on has forced me to reconsider the viability of continuing with the shows. And as I say, she's not the only one. So there's the pressures on the venues attempting to keep the doors open, the pressure on the artists who are looking at costlier petrol bills and accommodation and the like, which means now that they either can't tour or they can't stay on tour for as long as they'd want and visit more places off the beaten track. And I think that's the downside, one of the major downsides of this, is that tours are ending up being routed solely through major towns and cities, which I guess is part of the reason why the MVT have doubled down again on this call for an industry-wide levy on larger venues to support the smaller ones. Music Venue Trust CEO Mark David said, there are two options left. We all get our act together and voluntary donations are made from every big show, essentially, with that money going into a fund. Or the second option will be a statutory contribution like they have in France, where they have a 3.5% levy on ticket sales. And he then went on to say, there is not a third option where all music venues close and nobody minds. Everybody minds. As I say, excellent event, but the message very much, we've come a long way. Well done for grafting to keep your venues open, but we're all running out of time and something has to be done.
I did see a speech, actually. So this morning I was reading a speech from Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, from Friday, or the Friday as we're recording this. And she talked about this idea of local venues being sort of run by the community. I think she mentioned one venue that had been kind of reopened. So that was interesting to me. Like there were no policy promises or anything, but she did talk about the importance of grassroots venues, the problems, and the idea of the government would like to do something to help them stay open. So that was a little optimistic note. But again, you sort of always wait. You have a speech saying we'd like to do this, but you wait for the actual policy, don't you?
I think there's going to be a lot of discussions behind the scenes. It does seem like, it feels like the government are interested in helping out what they can do, because in terms of they can't. There's no easy way of the government giving us an easy financial solution where the money's coming from them. I mean, the Arts Council has, given out some money in the past to help out venues, but really, I think it's going to be a case of the government looking at the industry and seeing what the industry can do and how they could help in that process. But we shall see. We do actually have a missive from one of our listeners, which is coming up later, which suggests a way of encouraging more people to go to grassroots gigs. We'll get to that in a bit. But to start then with the questions this week, what about this from David McEnany, who says, what are the different ways artists charge for the use of samples of their music? And has it changed much over the years? For example, would it be harder or more expensive now to release the Beastie Boys' Paul's Boutique or De La Soul's 3 Feet High compared to when those albums came out? And I have no idea what the answer is to this, so I hope you can shed some light on it, Stuart.
Do you know, I had a really good weekend crate digging. Well, the equivalent of crate digging for research here, looking into this.
Yeah.
And there's a simple answer, which is like there is no standard price for samples. It's a negotiation, so it can be anything from, of course, don't worry, up to thousands of dollars, thousands of quid.
Right. Okay.
I suppose to take it back to basics. So when you sample something, there are 2 copyrights. There's the recording and the publishing, the song itself, and then the recording of it.
Yeah.
So if you are sampling a track, you need to clear both those copyrights, get a license for both of them. What you can do is you can re-record or replay a sample yourself, and in which case you only have to get the publishing copyright cleared. So you can not use the original recording. You could just re-record it yourself. Or when you hear people singing a line from a song in their song, like interpolations it's called, that's just one copyright publishing.
Okay.
Anyway, how much it costs? It's as long as a piece of string. So usually there's a fee plus a royalty. So you pay an upfront price plus a royalty. I saw one quote from someone called Deborah Manis Gardner. She's one of the top people who clear samples. She worked with De La Soul. We'll talk about it in a minute. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about the days when you could get like a James Brown sample for $500 up front, no more payments. And there's a more recent quote from someone called Tammy Luttrell, who runs, again, another company that helps artists clear samples. And she was saying for a major project, it starts as low as $2,500, but then rises and can get very expensive. And the stuff it depends on is how long is the sample you use? How prominent is it? Is it like the major hook of your track, or is it just kind of in the background? So it depends on these things. It depends if you're famous and rich or not. If you go in and say, I am the biggest band in the world, want to sample your song, people may have higher expectations of what you can pay than if you're a new artist. And the other thing is, if you sample something and don't clear it before it's released, then your leverage becomes somewhat different, because someone may come to say, hey, you've used a sample. We know it's this. You've had a hit. We want more money than maybe if you come to us first. So there's all these kind of variables. And so I mentioned De La Soul. They're one of the most interesting recent examples, because famously their catalogue wasn't available digitally at all. You couldn't buy it and download. You couldn't stream it. And that was not because they hadn't cleared all their samples. I mean, there's so many samples. Like if you think about a typical De La Soul album, there are just hundreds of samples. It's like real work of art. And the issue was not they all hadn't been cleared. It was that they'd been cleared for the original release, but the people, the rights holders, Tommy Boy at the time, weren't sure if they were cleared for digital release. And I think they took the decision, right, we're not going to release it because we could then end up with loads of lawsuits flying our direction. Mm-hmm. So for long years that happened. And so what happened was they worked with this expert, Deborah Manis Gardner, and it took about a year, and they cleared a lot of the samples for the release, but some of them had to be replayed or re-recorded. So that's why the streaming release of De La Soul songs, so there were some differences because some of the samples have been re-recorded. And she gave a really interesting interview talking about the kind of the challenges here. And she was talking about the fact that, the prices have gone up. Everyone's aware of kind of how much can be made here. And she talked about the fact that in some cases you can lose all the money if you're the artist sampling something. So I think Tribe Called Quest is a famous example. Can I Kick It? And that uses the famous kind of Velvet Underground. Is it Lou Reed? No, it's Velvet Underground, isn't it? Walk on the Wild Side. And she said, Lou Reed got 100% of the publishing for that song because of the use of that sample. So the band he did well, but the band who made it got nothing. So there's all these. And the other example I found was the Verve. Bittersweet Symphony, they're the famous example, where they used a strings re-recording of a Rolling Stones song. And again, it wasn't they didn't clear it. It was that they cleared use of the recording, and then they were sued saying you used too much of it, it's too prominent, and also it infringes the songwriter royalty here. And so again, all the publishing ended up going to the Rolling Stones and their former manager, until a few years ago, the Stones gave it back. And there was this really nice example of the Stones giving it back to the Verve, and Richard Ashcroft talking about saying, "I finally got this back," and they did it because they respect, musicians respect.
Yeah.
So that's some of the famous examples. But I did have some thoughts on alternatives as well, how you can make money from samples.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you're an artist, but you wait for someone to come and say, "Can I sample you?" and then you set your negotiation, or more properly, your rights holder does it. So your label, your publisher will negotiate. In an ideal world, they'll come to you and say, "Are you okay with this?" But the alternatives are sample libraries. So there's a whole bunch of companies that basically will sell samples where you can go in and say, "Right, I want this kind of beat, or this kind of horn motif, or this kind of thing," and you can find samples to use that are cleared for use. And the interesting thing happening there is those companies are working with some artists, so that artists will create sample packs to be sold. So if you're a musician, you can say, "Right, I'm going to create a bunch of beats, a bunch of loops, a bunch of guitar riffs, and I'm going to sell them as samples that can be used." So that's becoming, for some musicians, part of the way they make money. So it's not just waiting for people to come to you and say, "Can I sample your record?" It's like, I'm going to make samples designed for, this.
Yeah.
So so it's kind of fascinating. And then the other thing is as everything we talk about ever, AI is coming into this, and there are already some startups who are like AI-based sample creators, where you say, "Give me a beat of this kind, or give me a piano line in this chord sequence," and an AI will whip it up for you, and then you don't have to pay anyone. But those companies might be working with musicians to license to be trained on their work, so there might be some musicians in the background making money from that. So sampling is kind of this huge area, but you wait to be asked, or you create your own samples and sell them, or you find an AI company that might pay you for helping it train.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David, for that question. Here's another Dave. Well, Dave. Question from Dave Sparks. Oasis have repeatedly said they will cancel tickets sold via secondary ticketing sites for their gigs next summer. But how will they actually police this? How do they know which tickets have been sold via a third-party site versus someone transferring a ticket to a friend who they bought the ticket for? Do sites like Viagogo and StubHub have to tell them details of the tickets sold via their sites? This made me chuckle, Dave, because your question is almost word for word the question that I asked on another podcast, which you might have come across, called The Rise and Fall of Oasis, presented by myself and Joe Wiley. And we made this series before we knew that Oasis were going to get back together. But when they did, we were then called back in to record an emergency episode, an extra episode, to follow the news of the reunion. And at one point in episode 9, I did say, well, if they're going to cancel these tickets then, which have been sold on certain resale sites, how are they going to police this? But it is the $6 million question. It's one of which a lot of people are genuinely curious about. So, I mean, just to recap, when Oasis put tickets on sale for their dates next year, they specifically said that tickets could only be resold at face value via Ticketmaster and Twickets. In fact, they came out and said at one point, "We have noticed people attempting to sell tickets on the secondary market since the start of the pre-sale. Please note, tickets can only, capital letters, be resold at face value via Ticketmaster and Twickets. Tickets sold in breach of the terms and conditions will be cancelled by the promoters." So now they've said this out loud. I think they are going to have to seem to be doing something. But as you say, Dave, it's what and how, because, I mean, to my knowledge, I don't think there's no legal requirement for these secondary ticket sites to hand over details of transactions to the promoters. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but I've never come across that. Have you, Stuart?
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a famous thing with Ed Sheeran, actually, where his promoters cancelled tickets.
Yeah, he was very they were very proactive in that, I think, weren't they?
They were, and it was a mixture of, like, I think it's bringing. I think with that case, you had to bring your ID and proof of purchase to the thing. So you had to say, "Right, these are my tickets. I'm the person who bought them. Here's my ID proving it." So there was that kind of stuff. So that has happened, I think.
Yeah.
And what
I
they
d-
did then was they sold replacement tickets, I think. So you had to queue up and say, I've got this dodgy ticket, I'm not allowed in, but they would sell them a replacement ticket. So the fans would still get
right.
into the concert, but they would have to
Mm.
then go back to Viagogo or whoever. So that was the most famous example of someone saying we will cancel tickets and how they did it.
Mm.
And it was
I mean, what I was thinking about, if there's no legal reason for the secondary sites to give the details of
mm,
transactions, then surely sites like Viagogo and StubHub are going to say, well, it's nothing to do with us. We just provide the platform for
mm,
users to trade their tickets on. I mean, which tickets people choose to sell and for what price. Now, to do with us, it's all down to them. We're just facilitating a service which makes tickets available. That's all. That's all we do. And on another level, what's in it for them? Because if those sites pass on the information about ticket resales, aren't they effectively just grassing up the people who've used their sites by telling promoters who's sold what and for how much? Which I don't know, but it might undermine their business model if they did that.
well, one of the strands of people who've been campaigning for reform of the secondary market was that they need to publish when they sell a ticket the seat number. If it's got a seat number, they need to publish exactly the block seat number.
Mm.
And one part of that is for transparency, so that if you buy a ticket, you know exactly where you're going to be sitting. But a flip side of that would be that the promoter can say, right, someone is selling block B, seat 71, and I'll cancel it now. So that
Well,
was
this
one. I think,
this is
yeah.
this is it. Like, this is exactly it. You see, I
Mm,
was because I was quite astonished when I first heard this, but
mm,
yeah, I was told a few weeks back that the promoters they have they of late have gone old school and probably likely so with these Oasis tickets that they actually have people in an office on their computers watching sites like StubHub to see
mm.
which tickets are being sold or are being put up for resale. So they're building at least part of their intel by manually tracking ticket sales online, which as I said, I was quite taken aback by this to the point where I said, really, they've got people sitting there looking at the websites and looking at the which
Mm,
tickets are up for sale. And I was told, yeah, they do, which works for a site like I think StubHub lists the seat
mm.
numbers for the tickets, but Viagogo, I think they only list the row number, don't they, rather than the
I think
actual
it may be, yeah.
seat. Yeah.
And it's one of those things I think where realistically, if you have an Oasis ticket and you can't go, there are ways to resell it. Twickets and Ticketmaster, like you say, you can resell
Mm.
it on, and
Yeah.
then those systems will then say you've been sold it to this person, you did it the right way, that's all fine.
Hmm.
And so I kind of, I have sympathy for fans who didn't get tickets and are trying to get in any way they can. And I feel really cross about those people being exploited by buying a really expensive ticket somewhere else that could be cancelled.
Mm.
And I suspect it might be a case of, did you buy this? Is your name registered to it? If your name doesn't match the person who bought this ticket, you can't
Mm.
come in. And you're
Mm.
there as a fan. Not only are you losing out loads of money, but you don't get to go and see Oasis, and you've travelled to the venue. It's a really horrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to have some clarity on this, wouldn't it? I mean,
Mm,
unless the promoters keeping the way they're getting their information on ticket resales secret, unless there is a dark art to it that they don't want us to know, it would be good. It would be good to know just what they are aiming to do, how they're going to do it, and when they intend to start taking
yeah.
action and cancelling tickets if that's the plan. But until we find out more, if anyone knows what methods promoters may be using in these cases to trace the movements of tickets, do let us know. But till then, I think we're just going to have to wait and see for a bit. But talking of the Oasis gigs, here's another question from Robin Upton, who says, regarding the Oasis tour, it got me thinking, with all this money raised from ticket sales, at what point do Liam and Noel receive their payment? Do they get it now or do they get it paid after the gigs? And I can't really tell you specifically in this case when Oasis will get paid, Robin, but often it's the case that the promoter will pay half up front and then half after the gig has been played. I mean, if I'm booked for a DJ set, that's how my live agent works with the promoters. You negotiate a fee, you exchange the contract in the same way that Oasis's management and agent will have looked over the offer or offers. Then eventually they will have signed off the deal. And then the promoter is essentially putting down a deposit on the gig. So they might have got half the money already, with the other half after they've played. Having said that, as we know, with all aspects of live music, there are no hard and fast rules. And being such hot property, Oasis may have done things differently. They may have demanded all the money up front, for all we know. So, because one thing I have learned about live music, particularly in the course of the last year, is that although there are accepted models of working at different stages of popularity, there are many variants as well, depending on things like how big the artist is. But if you see pictures of Liam on a beach this Christmas, that probably means the promoters coughed up some of the money already. But thank you very much, Robin. Question from Ewan Brown. Now, this will take a little bit of digging into, but thank you very much for this, Ewan, who says, while listening to episodes about live music and live music venues, I had an idea on how to support them. Each year, there are thousands of people trying to get gig and festival tickets, but who miss out. With supply and demand, that'll always be the case. But why doesn't music follow football clubs by introducing some sort of loyalty scheme? It could work something like this. There are 50 small venues in the scheme, and if you buy a ticket for a gig there and attend, you get a point. Each big gig or festival would then have a pre-sale where 25% of tickets would go to people who've got more than, say, 10 points. There'd be complexities to this, not least venues owned by different organisations. However, it could have the benefit of giving people who arguably deserve to get tickets for popular events more of a chance to get those tickets, and in turn it could encourage people to attend smaller gigs. Ewan, thank you very much for this, because as you say, I mean, it tries to solve not one but two problems. There's the frustration of fans who miss out on tickets and the perilous financial state of some of our grassroots venues, as mentioned earlier. The trouble is, and we've been trying to work our way through this, but the trouble is, how would this be organised practically, and who, especially amongst the big players, would be keen to take part? But shall we work our way through this, see what we can do? What would you need to get done? What would you need to happen to get this off the ground? And who would have to buy into the idea? So for starters, you'd need to start a conversation with the organisers of Glastonbury Festival, definitely. I would think Live Nation, who handled some of the other popular festivals that sell out. So you'd have to approach them to see if they'd be willing to take part. And I mean, I don't know what they'd say or whether they'd be up for it, but they might see the reason behind it, or they might just think it's an extra complication when it comes to selling tickets. So you might have more luck with festivals like, I don't know, Green Man, End of the Road, those sort of festivals, which if you were going to start the scheme, might be more interested in taking part, might see the point of it, because in some ways they're closer to the grassroots venue circuit, I think. And obviously they're very fan-friendly festivals. But that's your starting point. Get the big sold-out festivals on side. How am I doing so far?
It's good, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. I think the short answer, like we said, is probably this is really complicated, like Ewan said, but it's a really interesting talking point. I mean, there is one parallel I thought of, which is there's the company called Tickets for Good, which secure tickets for people, NHS workers and public service people, and they've managed to get that up and running. This idea of the big gigs saying, yeah, actually, this is a good thing. Let's get a portion of our tickets to go to people who are working in the NHS. So that's kind of evidence that you can do this sort of thing, carve out a selection of tickets for a group of people.
Yeah,
and you would have to, I mean, obviously you need the network of independent venues, which I guess would be someone like the Music Venue Trust, wouldn't it? Of saying, right, these are the venues where you get points for this scheme.
Yeah, I think that is the thing. So So having got the big festivals on board, because then also Ewan mentioned, big gigs as well. So you'd have to do similarly the same thing, wouldn't you? You'd need to have all the major promoters buying into this, like Live Nation, SJM, Kilimanjaro, AEG, these sort of companies. You'd need to persuade them that this is for the benefit of loyal music fans who invest in the smaller gigs but come to your big gigs. But you'd have to give them a reason for saying, basically saying they deserve to be at the front of the queue, because I think the thing is, when it comes to those promoters, and this is what you'll have to get over, is with the promoters and the artists. Actually, you have to convince them that as they plan their ticket sale rollouts, that an additional complication of a separate new loyalty card pre-sale is going to be worth the additional effort for them, because they might just well turn around and say, hang on, we've already got the band's mailing list pre-sale or a pre-sale for people who've registered for tickets. So where does this fit in, and how many tickets will eventually be left for general sales? So you need to solve those issues. And then you're right. Then it comes to, well, how do you get your loyalty points? Where do you accrue them from? So you need to work out which small venues would be taking part. Is it a case of, as you say, going to the Music Venue Trust? Do we nominate a list of venues based on a set criteria, including, I think you'd include the size of the venue, but also genre of music as well, which they specialise in, because if we're going to do this, you'd want it to be a spread of musical styles, I think, to make this fair for everyone.
And also, I think
yeah,
one complication as well is, and this has been a problem with loyalty schemes in the past, is that the person buying the ticket isn't always the person going. So, for example, say you're a teenager who does go to a lot of local gigs, and then you want to go and see Taylor Swift or go to Glastonbury. It might be your parent buying that ticket. So, is there a way to make sure that the parent who has no record of going to local gigs, no points, can still buy? There's all these things to work out. But I tell you what, I think it would need, if it could happen. You need like I don't know, a Bob Geldof style figure, like someone really charismatic who could go into all the companies you've mentioned and go, I want to do this. It'd be brilliant for independent venues and music. Back me. Yeah, you would need someone, I think, who can go in and convince those companies this will be great. And in a way, like you talk about pre-sales, they were already like what, 4 pre-sales for every big gig. Like there's,
that's
like,
what
the
it
mailing
feels
list,
like.
If you've got an American Express card or whatever, like, whoever the sponsor is. So in theory, adding another one is maybe just sort of an extra step. But yeah, I think you need someone, the evangelist, who could go in and convince everyone this would be a great thing and let's do it. But who knows? I mean, it's a good conversation starter, this idea of how do you reward people who go and see a lot of local gigs?
Well, I'll tell you the thing about it is, because as soon as when I read the question, I was thinking, there's definitely something in this, and then during the course of the day, I kept unfortunately coming up with questions about how does this work logistically? Because I mean, here's another thing: does it apply just to how do you get your points? Do you get them when you buy tickets in advance online? And so, there is maybe a piece of software which registers. You go on a ticket site and say, I would like to buy a ticket for Bedford Esquires, and it comes up. It automatically, what happens? That ticket automatically registers, and a point goes into some sort of online wallet. In which case, if this is going to happen, then you're also going to need all the ticketing sites to take part as well. You'd need C-Tickets or Ticketmaster or Dice, because they would all have to have the same kind of software, I think, which registers your points. Which, I mean, as you know, Stuart, I'm not a tech whiz. I mean, but it strikes me, I don't think that would be too difficult. I don't think it'd be, any skin off the nose of the ticket companies either. But it does bring you then to the next question, which is, what about fans who walk up and buy a ticket with cash?
Yeah.
How do you register that loyalty point? And the only way I've found I've come up with so far is essentially your loyalty card would be like an old school loyalty card, and or something like the Oyster card in London. So every time you go to a small venue, you just tap in, and then it puts a point on your card. How about that? I thought that was inspired for a Monday morning.
I think so too. I think you are a tech whiz. I think you're selling yourself short there. I mean, the other thing that made me think was this would be quite the fun thing about this is this would create a nationwide league table of independent gig goers, wouldn't it? Like
Oh, good,
a literal.
yeah.
And I was thinking, do you remember that? You know that guy, Big Jeff, the guy from Bristol.
I
You ever
do
heard
know
of him?
Big Jeff. I know Big
Like
Jeff very well. Yeah,
he would be the top of that league because
yeah,
he goes everywhere in the country. Like it would be quite an interesting thing to kind of go, right, there are some people who do attend, dozens, hundreds of independent. So that would be a fun aspect of this, like a kind of a who are the 100 top independent venue fans in the country.
yeah,
But I think
yeah.
yeah, I mean I think it's a cool idea, and there is something in this idea of loyalty as proven by going to gigs locally
Mm,
and seeing bands and being rewarded for that. And like you say, it depends on who you get on board, what the rewards are, and it depends on figuring out, how to who's buying tickets for the bigger gigs and so on. But I don't
yeah.
know. There maybe is, but I think what we need, maybe it's Ewan, maybe he's a person, but I think you need someone to really take this on board and go around and knock
Mm.
everyone's heads together to make it happen. If it's going to happen.
There is one last thing, Ewan, which, and again, we are just, all we're doing is stress testing your idea.
Mm,
But the other thing, of course, is if you're going to do this, who's going to pay for it?
mm,
Who's going to foot the bill for the ticketing software or the loyalty cards or just building the website, the administration of the scheme? Where who's basically going to do customer services? Someone is going to have to put some investment into this to get it off the ground.
mm,
Because I suspect there will be people who, even when you've had the conversation, saying, "I want to do this. It's a really good, it's a good thing. Are you on board?" And they might say, "Yeah, well, yeah, we don't mind. We're not putting any money in, though."
mm.
That's the thing.
Yeah, someone else. I mean, the other thing I think is that this is the thing that's comparable to this is happening a little bit, and maybe more in the future, is loyalty to artists. So I think there's going to be
Mm,
there's a couple of startups I talked to recently who they're trying to help artists go, right, who are our 100 top fans, who are best, I think there's a lot of work around helping artists understand who their keenest fans are and being able
mm,
to reward them, whether that's with exclusive stuff, whether it's with early tickets. So I think you're most likely in the near term to see movement around that, which is more how much have you been to see your favorite band? Have you bought stuff from them? Have you watched their stuff, listened to their stuff? You get early tickets access. So I think we'll
mm.
see a lot more of that at the artist level. But again, loyalty schemes, it's a complicated subject, isn't it? There's like good and bad things about loyalty schemes. Like
Mm.
this idea of being your data collected can worry some people, but there's definitely some mileage in it, I think. And
Yeah.
if the ultimate aim is make sure fans get the tickets, not touts or bots, then it's a good thing.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, I know it does sound like we've spent 10 minutes shooting your idea out of the sky, but
Mm,
as with all new ideas, which come with a raft of challenges, if someone took this up, it's exactly what Stuart was saying.
mm,
If there was a person or an organisation who put this at the top of their mission statements, then you might be in with a shout. It needs someone in the offices explaining the idea and convincing people that but this could work and it's a good thing to do. Do you want to be part of it? And
mm.
because if we don't have ambitious ideas like this, we're never going to get anywhere. So
No.
thank you very much, Ewan, and thank you for listening. Can you do us a small favour? If you've enjoyed the show, please do subscribe in your podcast app and give us a review and a rating. Maybe tell a couple of other people about us as well. Alternatively, if you'd like to support the show with a little contribution to our costs, we now have a Patreon page where you can become a Price of Music fan or super fan for as little as £2 a month. Just go to patreon.com/the price of music if you'd like to find out more. And of course, if you have a question you'd like us to attempt to answer on the show, or if you've got an idea you'd like to run past us, or maybe even some advice when it comes to spending money in the music business, email us at thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you very much, Stuart. We have a very busy few days ahead, so we shall be back next week. Till then, take care, everybody. Cheerio.